In a quiet little town surrounded by green fields and winding roads, there lived a young woman named Clara. Life in this town was simple but tough, especially for someone like Clara, who grew up in a modest family that struggled to make ends meet. Her parents worked hard every day, her father as a mechanic and her mother as a seamstress. But their combined income was barely enough to cover rent, food, and basic necessities. Despite the hardships, Clara learned early on to value hard work, kindness, and perseverance. These lessons would shape her life in ways she could never have imagined. After finishing high school, Clara knew college wasn't an option for her. Her family couldn't afford it, so instead, she decided to take on whatever jobs came her way to help lighten their financial burden. At first, she babysat neighborhood kids, cleaned houses, and even picked vegetables during harvest season at nearby farms. But none of these jobs provided steady income or allowed her to dream beyond survival. That's when fate stepped in and led her to a job that would change everything, serving coffee at a small cafe located just steps away from the local courthouse. The cafe was cozy, with wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. It catered mostly to lawyers, judges, court clerks, and jurors who needed a quick caffeine fix between hearings. For Clara, this job felt like a blessing. She loved interacting with people, listening to their stories and making them smile, even if only for a moment. Every morning she'd arrive before sunrise, tie her apron around her waist, and prepare for the rush of customers streaming in. What Clara didn't realize at the time was how much she would learn simply by being present in that space. The courthouse. Crowd brought more than just orders for lattes and cappuccinos. They brought conversations about justice, fairness, and morality. As they sipped their drinks, they debated heatedly over cases, sharing details about trials, defendants, and verdicts. Some argued passionately about whether the law truly served everyone equally, while others expressed frustration with the system's flaws. To Clara, these discussions were fascinating. Though she didn't understand all the legal terms, she found herself drawn to the idea of using rules and principles to help people navigate difficult situations. One particular customer stood out. Among the rest, a middle-aged lawyer named Mr. Thompson. He visited the cafe almost daily, always ordering the same thing: a double espresso with no sugar. Unlike many of the other patrons who treated Clara like just another barista, Mr. Thompson took the time to chat with her. He noticed how curious she was about the legal world and often explained concepts in simpler terms so she could follow along. "You've got a sharp mind," he once told her after she asked a thoughtful question about a high-profile case he was handling. "If you ever want to explore this field, I think you'd do great." Clara laughed nervously at his comment, brushing it off as polite encouragement. After all, becoming part of the legal system seemed impossible for someone like her. Still, those words lingered in her mind long after Mr. Thompson left the cafe. They planted a tiny seed of curiosity inside her, a spark that made her wonder what it might feel like to stand in a courtroom, not as a server delivering coffee, but as someone actively involved in shaping outcomes. As weeks turned into months, Clara began paying closer attention to the conversations happening around her. She listened intently as two prosecutors discussed evidence strategies, or as a defense attorney vented about an unfair ruling. Each story painted a vivid picture of a world where decisions carried immense weight, where lives hung in the balance based on interpretations of right and wrong. Sometimes Clara found herself imagining what she would say if she were sitting behind the judge's bench, weighing arguments and deciding the fate of others. Would she be fair, compassionate, wise? These thoughts stayed with her even outside of work hours. On slow days when the cafe was empty and the hum of the espresso machine filled the silence, Clara would sit quietly and let her mind wander. She dreamed of a future where she wasn't confined to brewing coffee and taking orders. Instead, she envisioned herself walking confidently into a courtroom, ready to fight for justice. Of course, these dreams felt distant, almost laughable given her current circumstances. Yet deep down, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more waiting for her beyond the counter. Her journey toward discovering that more would begin with a single step, one she hadn't planned, but that would ultimately set her on a path unlike any she had imagined. Little did Clara know, the very place where she poured cups of coffee would soon become the foundation for her transformation. Not just as a barista, but as someone destined to serve justice in ways she never thought possible. One cold and dreary morning, as rain pattered against the cafe windows, Clara found herself unusually busy. The courthouse had been packed with cases that day, and lawyers, clerks, and jurors poured into the cafe seeking warmth and caffeine. Clara moved swiftly between tables, refilling mugs and jotting down orders. Despite the chaos, she managed to keep a smile on her face, knowing that her cheerful demeanor often brightened the mood of stressed-out customers. As the lunchtime rush began to die down, an elderly man entered the cafe. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase, his posture stooped slightly from years of weariness. Clara recognized him immediately. It was Judge Harold Bennett, a respected figure in the town known for his fairness and wisdom in the courtroom. She had seen him many times before, always sitting by the window, sipping black coffee while reading over case files or staring pensively at the rain-soaked streets outside. Today, however, Judge Bennett looked different. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by an air of exhaustion. His shoulders slumped as though carrying the weight of the world. Clara approached him cautiously, placing a steaming cup of coffee on his table. "Your regular order, sir," she said softly, offering a warm smile. Then, unable to resist, she added, "Rough day?" The judge glanced up, surprised by her question. For a moment he hesitated, as if unsure whether to engage in conversation. But something about Clara's genuine concern must have struck a chord, because he nodded slowly. "You could say that," he replied, his voice heavy with fatigue. "It's not easy making decisions that affect people's lives." Intrigued, Clara stayed a little longer than usual, leaning against the edge of the table. "What do you mean, sir?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Isn't being a judge, I don't know, exciting? You get to decide what's right and wrong." Judge Bennett chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's not as glamorous as it sounds," he said. "Every verdict I deliver changes someone's life, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And no matter how carefully I weigh the facts, there are always doubts. Did I interpret the law correctly? Was I fair to both sides? It's a burden I carry every single day." Clara listened intently, hanging on to every word. She had never thought about the emotional toll that came with being a judge. To her, judges were figures of authority, people who commanded respect and made decisions with confidence. But here was Judge Bennett, openly admitting his struggles, revealing a side of himself that few ever saw. Encouraged by his openness, Clara ventured another question. "Do you ever regret becoming a judge?" The judge paused, taking a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "No, I don't regret it," he said finally. "But it's not a job for the faint-hearted. It requires patience, empathy, and a deep understanding of human nature. Most importantly, it demands a commitment to justice, not just following the letter of the law, but ensuring that the spirit of fairness prevails." His words resonated deeply with Clara. Though she didn't fully grasp the complexities of the legal system, she understood the importance of fairness. Growing up in a family that constantly faced hardships, she had witnessed firsthand how unfair circumstances could crush dreams and limit opportunities. The idea of fighting for justice, of standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves, stirred something inside her, a longing to be part of something bigger than herself. Sensing her interest, Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly, studying her face. "You seem curious," he observed. "Have you ever considered pursuing a career in law?" Clara blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Me?" she stammered, pointing to herself. "I'm just a barista. I don't know anything about law." The judge smiled kindly. "You'd be surprised how many great minds start without knowing much. What matters is your willingness to learn and your passion for doing good. From what I've seen, you have both." His words lingered in Clara's mind long after their conversation ended. As Judge Bennett left the cafe, tipping her generously and thanking her for the chat, Clara felt a strange mix of emotions. excitement, fear, and determination. Could she really pursue a career in law? Was it possible for someone like her, with no connections or resources, to enter such a prestigious field? That evening, as Clara walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, she replayed the judge's advice in her head. She thought about the countless hours she had spent listening to court-related discussions at the cafe, piecing together bits of knowledge and forming opinions on fairness and morality. She realized that, despite her lack of formal education, she already possessed qualities essential for a legal career: empathy, critical thinking, and a desire to help others. Over the next few days, Clara couldn't shake the idea of studying law. She started paying even closer attention to the conversations happening around her, jotting down notes whenever she heard new terms or concepts. She also began researching online, learning about the steps required to become a lawyer. To her surprise, she discovered that night classes were available at a community college nearby, a flexible option designed for working adults like her. Still, doubt crept in. How could she afford tuition fees while supporting her family? Would she be able to balance work and studies? And most importantly, would she fit in among students who likely came from privileged backgrounds? Her fears were compounded one afternoon when a group of young law interns visited the cafe. They laughed loudly, discussing prestigious universities and internships with big-name firms. Clara overheard snippets of their conversation, feeling increasingly out of place. These were the kinds of people who pursued careers in law, not someone like her serving coffee in a small-town cafe. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Clara!" It was Mr. Thompson, the lawyer who had encouraged her months ago. He greeted her warmly, ordering his usual double espresso. Noticing her troubled expression, he raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind?" Hesitant at first, Clara decided to confide in him. She shared her dream of studying law, along with her fears of failure and inadequacy. To her relief, Mr. Thompson listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he smiled reassuringly. "Clara, let me tell you something," he said. "Success isn't determined by where you start. It's determined by how hard you're willing to work. If you truly want this, nothing can stop you." His encouragement reignited Clara's resolve. That night, she sat down with her parents, explaining her plans and asking for their support. Though initially worried about the financial strain, they agreed to back her decision, proud of her ambition. With their blessing, Clara enrolled in night classes, embarking on a journey that would test her limits but ultimately transform her life. Looking back, Clara realized that her encounter with Judge Bennett had been more than just a casual conversation. It had been a turning point, a moment that opened her eyes to possibilities she had never dared to dream of. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a remarkable story, one that would take her from brewing coffee to delivering justice, in ways she never imagined. Clara's decision to enroll in night classes marked the beginning of one of the most challenging, yet transformative periods of her life. Balancing work at the cafe with her studies was no easy task, but she approached it with the same determination that had carried her through every other hardship. Every day felt like a juggling act, rushing from brewing coffee and serving customers during the day to sitting in classrooms and poring over textbooks late into the night. Yet, despite the exhaustion, Clara never lost sight of her goal. She reminded herself daily why she had started this journey: to fight for fairness, to make a difference, and to prove that someone like her could break barriers. Her first few weeks in class were overwhelming. Most of her classmates came from backgrounds vastly different from hers. They wore tailored suits, drove expensive cars, and spoke confidently about internships at top law firms. Clara, on the other hand, arrived straight from the cafe, still wearing her apron some days, carrying books tucked under her arm alongside a thermos of coffee. At first, she felt out of place, like an outsider peeking into a world she didn't belong to. But instead of letting self-doubt consume her, Clara channeled her energy into focusing on her studies. The curriculum was rigorous, filled with dense legal texts, complex case studies, and endless terminology that seemed designed to confuse anyone new to the field. Clara spent countless hours reading and rereading chapters, highlighting key points, and taking meticulous notes. When she didn't understand something, she stayed after class to ask questions or sought help from professors during office hours. Her dedication quickly earned her respect, even from those who initially dismissed her as the barista. One of Clara's biggest challenges was finding time to study while managing her responsibilities at home and work. Some nights, after closing the cafe, she would sit at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers, trying to stay awake long enough to finish assignments. There were moments when fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, and tears streamed down her face as frustration bubbled over. But each time she felt like giving up, she remembered Judge Bennett's words. Justice demands patience, empathy, and commitment. Those words became her mantra, pushing her forward even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Her colleagues at the cafe noticed how hard she was working and rallied around her. Maria, the head barista, often covered shifts for Clara without asking, knowing how much her education meant to her. "You're going places," Maria told her one evening as they cleaned up together. "We're all rooting for you." Even regular customers began showing their support, leaving encouraging notes on napkins or slipping extra tips into her tip jar. Their kindness fueled Clara's spirit, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this journey. As months passed, Clara began gaining confidence not just academically but personally as well. She joined group discussions in class, sharing insights based on her unique perspective as someone who had witnessed real-life struggles firsthand. While others debated theoretical scenarios, Clara brought stories from the cafe, tales of single mothers fighting custody battles, immigrants navigating complicated visa processes, and workers seeking compensation after workplace injuries. These anecdotes added depth to classroom conversations, earning her admiration from both peers and professors. Her breakthrough moment came during a mock trial exercise organized by her criminal law professor. Students were divided into teams, tasked with arguing either for the prosecution or defense in a fictional case involving theft charges against a homeless man. Clara was assigned to the defense team, and though nervous, she threw herself into preparing her arguments. She researched similar cases, analyzed evidence, and crafted a compelling narrative centered on systemic inequality and lack of access to resources. On the day of the presentation, Clara stood before her classmates and delivered her argument with passion and clarity. To punish this man without addressing the root causes of his actions is not justice, it's cruelty, she concluded, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. True justice means understanding the circumstances that lead people to desperate measures and offering solutions rather than punishment. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Her professor nodded approvingly, praising her ability to blend legal reasoning with empathy. For the first time, Clara realized she wasn't just surviving in this world, she was excelling. Her unconventional background wasn't a disadvantage, it was her strength. It gave her a fresh perspective, allowing her to see nuances others might overlook. Encouraged by her success, Clara took on additional opportunities to gain practical experience. She applied for internships at local public defender offices, eager to learn how the legal system operated outside the classroom. One summer, she landed a position assisting a seasoned attorney named Ms. Rodriguez, known for her fierce advocacy for marginalized communities. Under Ms. Rodriguez's mentorship, Clara learned the ropes of courtroom procedures, client interviews, and case preparation. One particular case left a lasting impression on her. A young mother named Lisa had been charged with shoplifting diapers and baby formula to care for her infant son. As Clara helped prepare Lisa's defense, she couldn't help but draw parallels between Lisa's situation and her own family's struggles. During the trial, Clara watched as Ms. Rodriguez argued passionately for leniency, emphasizing Lisa's desperation and lack of alternatives. When the judge ultimately dismissed the charges, Lisa broke down in tears of relief, hugging Clara tightly, as she thanked them for saving her family. That moment solidified Clara's resolve. She realized that her dream wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using her skills to uplift others, to give a voice to those who felt powerless. Each victory, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in the power of justice and her role in delivering it. By the time Clara completed her undergraduate degree, she had transformed from a hesitant newcomer into a confident advocate. Her grades reflected her hard work, earning her scholarships to attend law school, a feat she once thought impossible. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, surrounded by cheering friends, family, and colleagues from the cafe, Clara allowed herself a rare moment of pride. She had taken a leap of faith, trusting that her dreams were worth pursuing, and now she stood poised to take the next step toward becoming a lawyer. But Clara knew this was only the beginning. Law school would bring its own set of challenges, requiring even more sacrifices and perseverance. Still, she faced the future with unwavering determination, knowing that every obstacle she overcame brought her closer to her ultimate goal, serving justice, not just as a participant in the legal system but as a leader shaping its future. Law school was a whole new world for Clara, one that tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. If balancing work and undergraduate studies had been challenging, law school felt like running a marathon uphill with weights strapped to her ankles. The workload was relentless, reading hundreds of pages of case law each week, writing detailed briefs, and participating in intense debates during class. For someone who had never imagined herself stepping foot into such an elite institution, the pressure often felt suffocating. Clara quickly realized that her classmates came from vastly different backgrounds than hers. Many were fresh out of prestigious universities, armed with connections, resources, and years of preparation for this very moment. They spoke confidently about internships at top-tier firms, family legacies in law, and summers spent volunteering at international legal organizations. Clara, on the other hand, juggled her coursework while working part-time shifts at the cafe to make ends meet. Her wardrobe consisted mostly of second-hand suits she'd bought at thrift stores, and her textbooks were a mix of borrowed copies and heavily discounted ones she found online. At first, the disparity between her life and theirs made her feel like an imposter. During group projects, some teammates questioned her contributions, assuming she wouldn't pull her weight. In seminars, professors sometimes overlooked her raised hand, calling on students whose answers sounded more polished or rehearsed. There were moments when Clara doubted whether she truly belonged in this environment. But every time self-doubt crept in, she reminded herself of how far she had already come and how much farther she wanted to go. Her turning point came during a particularly grueling semester when she was assigned to represent a fictional client in a moot court competition. Moot court was essentially a simulated trial where students argued cases before a panel of judges, mimicking real courtroom procedures. It was a high-stakes event, and many participants took it as seriously as actual trials. Clara's team was tasked with defending a young man accused of vandalism during a protest. While her teammates focused on technicalities and precedents, Clara zeroed in on the human element of the case, the defendant's motivations, the systemic issues that led to his actions, and the broader implications of punishing activism. On the day of the competition, Clara stood nervously in front of the panel of judges, her heart pounding so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. As she began presenting her argument, her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to focus. She spoke passionately about the importance of context in justice, arguing that laws should not exist in isolation, but must consider the realities of people's lives. By the end of her presentation, the room was silent, not because they disagreed, but because her words had resonated deeply. When the judges announced the results later that evening, Clara's name was called as the winner of the Best Advocate award. The applause that followed was deafening, and tears welled up in her eyes as she accepted the trophy. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as the barista or the underdog, but as someone capable of making meaningful contributions to the field of law. That victory gave her the confidence to push through the remaining challenges of law school. Beyond academics, Clara sought opportunities to gain practical experience. She interned at a public defender's office, working tirelessly to assist clients who couldn't afford private representation. These individuals came from all walks of life: single mothers fighting eviction notices, teenagers caught in the juvenile justice system, undocumented immigrants facing deportation, but they shared one thing in common: desperation. Each case was a reminder of the inequalities Clara had witnessed growing up, fueling her determination to fight for fairness. One case in particular left an indelible mark on her. A woman named Elena had been arrested for shoplifting groceries to feed her children after losing her job due to illness. When Clara met her, Elena was broken, convinced that the system would crush her without mercy. Clara spent countless hours preparing Elena's defense, gathering evidence of her circumstances and crafting arguments that highlighted her humanity rather than her alleged crime. On the day of the hearing, Clara stood beside Elena in court, delivering a powerful plea for compassion over punishment. The judge ultimately ruled in Elena's favor, dismissing the charges and recommending community service instead. As Elena hugged Clara tightly, thanking her through tears, Clara felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about restoring hope to someone who had almost given up. Moments like these reminded Clara why she had chosen this path in the first place. Despite her successes, law school wasn't without its setbacks. Clara failed her first mock exam, struggled to keep up with fast-paced lectures, and occasionally clashed with peers who dismissed her ideas. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, wondering if she was cut out for this demanding career. Yet every failure taught her resilience, teaching her to adapt, learn, and grow stronger. Her professors eventually recognized her potential, offering mentorship and guidance. One professor in particular encouraged her to apply for a fellowship program aimed at training future leaders in public interest law. Though intimidated by the application process, Clara poured her heart into her essays, sharing her journey and vision for creating a fairer legal system. To her astonishment, she was selected for the fellowship, earning financial support and invaluable networking opportunities. By the time graduation rolled around, Clara had earned not only her degree but also the respect of her peers and mentors. Her classmates, who once underestimated her, now sought her advice on difficult cases. Professors praised her ability to blend empathy with logic, calling her a natural advocate for justice. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Clara walked across the stage to receive her diploma with a sense of accomplishment she had never felt before. As she looked out at the audience, her parents beaming with pride, Maria from the cafe wiping away tears, Judge Bennett nodding approvingly, Clara knew she had achieved something extraordinary. She had transformed from a young woman serving coffee in a quiet town to a graduate ready to step into the world of law. But this was only the beginning. Armed with knowledge, experience, and an unshakable belief in justice, Clara prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that her journey was far from over. After graduating from law school, Clara stepped into the professional world with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Her first job was at a small public defender's office in the same town where she had grown up. It wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it gave her the opportunity to do what she loved most: fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The office was understaffed and overburdened, handling dozens of cases each week with limited resources. Despite the challenges, Clara threw herself into her work, determined to make a difference. Her early days as a lawyer were humbling. She spent hours poring over case files, meeting clients in cramped jail cells and arguing motions before skeptical judges. Many of her clients were people society had forgotten: homeless individuals, undocumented workers, and low-income families struggling to survive. Each case came with its own set of complications, requiring Clara to think creatively and strategically. But no matter how tough things got, she refused to give up on her clients. She believed that everyone deserved a fair chance, regardless of their circumstances. One of her first major cases involved defending a teenage boy named Marcus, who had been charged with burglary after breaking into a convenience store. At first glance, the evidence against him seemed overwhelming. Security footage showed his face clearly, and stolen items were found in his possession. But as Clara dug deeper, she uncovered a story far more complex than the prosecution portrayed. Marcus had recently lost his mother to cancer and was living on the streets, unable to afford food or shelter. On the night of the alleged crime, he had broken into the store not to steal money, but to grab snacks because he hadn't eaten in 2 days. Clara used this information to build her defense, focusing on mitigating factors and advocating for rehabilitation rather than punishment. During the trial, she delivered an impassioned closing argument, urging the jury to see Marcus not as a criminal but as a scared teenager trying to survive. Justice isn't about locking people away, she told them. It's about understanding why they made the choices they did and giving them tools to change. In the end, the judge sentenced Marcus to community service and placed him under supervision instead of sending him to juvenile detention. For Clara, it was a victory, not just because she won the case, but because she had given Marcus a second chance. Word of Clara's dedication spread quickly within the legal community. Judges began noticing her sharp arguments and compassionate approach. Prosecutors respected her for being thorough yet fair, and most importantly, her clients trusted her completely, knowing she genuinely cared about their futures. Over time, Clara earned a reputation as one of the best public defenders in the region, often taking on cases others deemed too difficult or hopeless. But success didn't come without sacrifices. Long hours at the office meant less time with her family and friends. Holidays were spent preparing for trials rather than celebrating with loved ones. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, and doubts crept in about whether all the hard work was worth it. Yet every time she saw the relief on a client's face after securing a favorable verdict, or heard a heartfelt thank you from someone whose life she had helped change, she reminded herself why she had chosen this path. As years passed, Clara's career continued to grow. She moved from the public defender's office to a mid-sized law firm specializing in civil rights litigation. Here she tackled systemic issues like police brutality, housing discrimination, and workplace inequality. One of her landmark cases involved representing a group of factory workers who had been exposed to toxic chemicals due to unsafe working conditions. The company responsible tried to silence the workers by threatening lawsuits, but Clara fought back relentlessly. After months of negotiations and court battles, she secured a settlement that included compensation for the victims and mandated safety reforms across the industry. The case garnered national attention, earning Clara widespread recognition as a champion for workers' rights. Despite her growing fame, Clara remained grounded. She never forgot where she came from or the struggles that shaped her journey. Whenever possible, she returned to the cafe where it all began, catching up with Maria and reminiscing about old times. She also mentored aspiring lawyers, especially young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, encouraging them to pursue their dreams despite the odds. "If I can do it," she would tell them, "so can you." Then, one day, an unexpected opportunity arose. An opening for a judgeship in the Yasiaj local courthouse. When Clara received the nomination letter, she stared at it in disbelief. Becoming a judge had always been a distant dream, something she dared not hope for. But now, here it was, a chance to step into the very courtroom where she had once served, coffee and deliver justice from behind the bench. The confirmation process was rigorous, involving interviews, background checks, and evaluations of her legal expertise. Some critics questioned whether someone without elite connections or decades of experience was qualified for such a prestigious role. But supporters rallied around her, highlighting her track record of fairness, empathy, and integrity. Testimonies poured in from former clients, colleagues, and even adversaries, praising her commitment to justice. In the end, Clara was unanimously confirmed, becoming the youngest judge ever appointed to the courthouse. On her first day as a judge, Clara walked into the courtroom with a mixture of pride and humility. As she took her seat behind the bench, she glanced around at the familiar faces, the clerks, bailiffs, and attorneys she had worked alongside for years. Then her eyes landed on the gallery, where her parents sat beaming with tears in their eyes. It was a surreal moment, one that brought her full circle, from brewing coffee to presiding over trials. Her transition to the bench wasn't without challenges. Being a judge required a different mindset. She had to remain impartial, setting aside personal biases and emotions to ensure fairness for all parties involved. At times, the weight of her decisions felt heavier than ever before. Sentencing hearings, custody disputes, and criminal trials tested her resolve daily. But Clara approached each case with the same care and diligence she had shown throughout her career, striving to balance compassion with accountability. One of her earliest rulings as a judge involved a domestic violence case. A woman named Sarah had filed for a restraining order against her abusive partner, but the defendant argued that the allegations were exaggerated and motivated by anger. The evidence was conflicting, making it difficult to determine the truth. Clara listened intently to both sides, asking thoughtful questions to clarify details. In the end, she granted the restraining order, emphasizing the importance of protecting victims and holding abusers accountable. Afterward, Sarah approached her tearfully, thanking her for believing her story. "You saved my life," Sarah whispered. Those words stayed with Clara long after the courtroom emptied, reminding her of the profound impact her decisions could have. As months turned into years, Clara became known as a judge who prioritized equity and humanity. She implemented reforms to make the legal system more accessible, introducing programs to assist low-income litigants and providing translation services for non-English speakers. She also advocated for restorative justice initiatives, encouraging offenders to take responsibility for their actions while offering opportunities for rehabilitation. Under her leadership, the courthouse transformed into a place where people felt seen and heard, regardless of their background. Though Clara's rise to becoming a judge seemed improbable to outsiders, those who knew her understood that it was the culmination of years of hard work, resilience, and unwavering belief in justice. From serving coffee to delivering verdicts, her journey had come full circle, proving that true greatness comes not from privilege or circumstance, but from determination and a desire to serve others. And as she looked ahead to the future, Clara knew this was only the beginning of her legacy, one built on fairness, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Years passed, and Clara's reputation as a fair and compassionate judge grew beyond the small town where she had started her journey. Her courtroom became known as a place where everyone, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, was treated with dignity and respect. She presided over cases ranging from minor disputes to high-profile trials that captured national attention. Yet, no matter the stakes, Clara approached each case with the same level of care and commitment, ensuring that justice was served not just according to the letter of the law, but also in spirit. One landmark case cemented her legacy as a trailblazer for justice. A large corporation had been accused of dumping toxic waste into a river, contaminating the water supply for an entire community. The residents, many of whom were farmers and factory workers, filed a class-action lawsuit seeking compensation for health damages and environmental cleanup. The corporation fought back aggressively, hiring top-tier lawyers who tried to intimidate the plaintiffs into dropping the case. When the trial began, the odds seemed stacked against the victims. Clara listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments. On one hand, the corporation argued that its actions were legal under outdated regulations and that cleaning up the mess would bankrupt the company, costing thousands of jobs. On the other hand, the residents pleaded for accountability, describing how polluted water had caused illnesses, destroyed crops, and devastated their livelihoods. It was a complex case with no easy answers, forcing Clara to weigh economic concerns against human suffering. After weeks of deliberation, Clara delivered her verdict. She ruled in favor of the residents, ordering the corporation to fund medical treatment for affected individuals, clean up the river, and implement stricter environmental safeguards moving forward. In her written opinion, she emphasized the importance of holding corporations accountable for their actions, stating, "The law exists not only to protect profits, but to preserve lives and communities." Her decision sent shockwaves through the legal world, setting a precedent for future environmental litigation and earning praise from activists across the country. But Clara didn't stop there. Recognizing that systemic change required more than individual rulings, she spearheaded initiatives to reform the legal system itself. She partnered with local organizations to provide free legal clinics for low-income families, ensuring that everyone had access to representation. She introduced mediation programs to resolve disputes outside of court, reducing costs and delays for litigants. And she advocated for increased diversity among judges and lawyers, believing that a truly equitable system needed voices from all walks of life. Her efforts extended beyond the courthouse walls. Clara frequently gave talks at schools and community centers, sharing her story to inspire others. She spoke candidly about the challenges she faced, from growing up in poverty to overcoming self-doubt, and encouraged young people to dream big despite their circumstances. "Your background doesn't define you," she often said. "What defines you is how hard you're willing to work and how much you care about making the world a better place." Her message resonated deeply, especially with women and minorities, who saw themselves reflected in her journey. Letters poured in from aspiring lawyers thanking her for showing them that success was possible even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Some wrote about pursuing careers in law because of her example. Others shared stories of perseverance inspired by her courage. Clara kept every letter, reading them on tough days to remind herself why her work mattered. As her career progressed, Clara received numerous awards and accolades, including honorary degrees and civic honors. But what meant the most to her were the quiet moments of gratitude. From a mother whose child custody battle she resolved fairly, from a teenager whose wrongful conviction she overturned, from a senior citizen whose eviction notice she dismissed. These personal connections reminded her that true justice wasn't measured in headlines or trophies, but in the lives she touched along the way. Eventually, the years caught up with Clara. After decades of service, she decided it was time to step down from the bench and pass the torch to the next generation. Her retirement ceremony was attended by colleagues, friends, and former clients, all eager to celebrate the woman who had transformed their lives. Speeches were given, tears were shed, and standing ovations filled the room. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Judge Bennett, now frail but still sharp-witted, stood up to speak. "Clara," he began, his voice steady despite his age. "When I first met you serving coffee in that cafe, I never imagined you'd end up here. But looking back, I realize I should have seen it coming. You've always had the heart of a leader and the soul of a fighter. What you've accomplished isn't just remarkable, it's revolutionary. You've shown us that justice isn't reserved for the privileged few, but belongs to everyone." The audience erupted in applause as Clara wiped away tears, overwhelmed by emotion. As she looked around the room, she saw faces that represented every chapter of her journey. The baristas from the cafe, the professors who mentored her, the clients she fought for, and the family who supported her unconditionally. Each person was a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and unwavering belief in fairness. In retirement, Clara didn't slow down entirely. She dedicated her time to mentoring young lawyers, writing articles about legal reform and volunteering with organizations focused on social justice. She also penned a memoir titled "From Coffee to Courtroom," chronicling her extraordinary journey and offering advice to anyone daring to chase their dreams. The book became a bestseller, inspiring readers worldwide to challenge barriers and strive for meaningful change. Looking back on her life, Clara felt immense pride, not just for what she had achieved, but for the ripple effect her work had created. She thought about Marcus, the teenage boy she defended early in her career, who went on to graduate college and become a teacher. She thought about Sarah, the domestic violence survivor, who rebuilt her life and started a nonprofit to help others escape abusive relationships. She thought about Elena, the single mother she represented, who opened her own bakery and hired struggling women from the community. These stories, and countless others like them, were proof that justice could spark transformation far beyond the courtroom. On her final day in the courthouse, Clara took a long walk through its halls, savoring the memories etched into every corner. She paused by the cafe where she once worked, smiling as she remembered the conversations and dreams that blossomed over cups of coffee. Then she stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air and gazing at the town she loved so dearly. Though she was leaving behind the bench, she knew her legacy would endure. In the reforms she championed, the lives she changed, and the inspiration she provided to future generations. Clara's journey from serving coffee to delivering justice was more than just a rags-to-riches tale. It was a testament to the power of determination, empathy, and the belief that anyone, regardless of their starting point, can make a difference. Her story reminded the world that justice isn't confined to grand gestures or lofty ideals. It lives in the everyday choices we make to stand up for what's right, to listen to those who feel unheard, and to fight for a better tomorrow. And so as Clara walked away from the courthouse for the last time, she carried with her not just the weight of her accomplishments, but also the hope that her journey would continue to inspire others to serve justice in their own unique ways. For Clara, justice wasn't just a title or a role. It was a lifelong mission, one she had fulfilled with grace, integrity, and an unshakable commitment to fairness.